My name is Cesar Rivera. I'm a graduate student here at Kansas State University in the College Student Development Program. I also am a graduate assistant and doing an apprenticeship here at the Career Center Studio. So our presentation today is on early career preparation, getting the most out of graduate school. So also I would like to introduce the speakers at this time and thank them for being here. First, we have Dylan Howe, who is a Master in Architecture, Interior Architecture and Product Design graduate from Kansas State. We have Dr. Elena Colburn. We have Dr. Onyedechi Kachi Egwerki, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, and Dr. Hannah Shear. Thank you all for being here. I would also like to say that the way that I plan to moderate this event is by first asking some questions to our speakers, and for our guests who are in attendance, thank you for being here as well. You are more than welcome to leave some questions in the chat feature. And then also at the end of the discussion from our speakers, I will open the floor to questions that you may ask here in the chat as well. How does that sound for everyone?
Perfect.
Awesome, awesome. So first, I'd like to ask our speakers to provide a brief 3 to 5 minute introduction on their educational and professional background. And Dr. Egwerki, I will start with you, sir.
Thank you, Cesar. So I did my PhD in leadership communication at Kansas State University, apparently. And I'm currently a lecturer at the University of Georgia. Here I teach leadership. I guess that was the question. Yeah, I teach leadership here at University of Georgia. And I've been here for only about, what, 7, 8 months. But yeah, pretty much that's it.
Okay. Dr. Colburn?
Yes, hello. So as mentioned, my name is Dr. Elena Colburn. I'm a survivor advocate within the Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education here at K-State. And so in terms of my education background, I was actually born and raised in Manhattan. Both of my parents worked at K-State. And so when it came time for me to figure out where I was going to college, there weren't very many options available to me, given my parents' position at the university, which is all well and good. I'm not complaining about it. But I have all of my degrees from K-State. So I have 2 bachelors in psychology and sociology. I have a master's in sociology, and my PhD is also in sociology. I have specializations though within criminology and social inequalities. And so a lot of my education really focused on criminology and basically the study and science of crime and criminality. And then, like I said, I work here at K-State in the CARE office, and the work I do is advocacy work. And so I'm a confidential resource on campus. And so what that looks like is I work with students, faculty, and staff, and even alumni who've experienced sexual violence, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and harassment. And so I work with folks who've been impacted by those crimes and basically try and get them connected to resources, both on campus and off, and basically help them on their path towards healing. I really like what I do, and I'm very excited to get to talk about all things graduate school and career today. So thanks so much for having me.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Shear?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Hannah Shear. I'll say my educational background started at an early age on the family farm. That's where I first started learning so many things. And that also kind of ignited my passion for agriculture, which is what I ended up going on and continuing to study in my formal education. So I'll call my farm upraising the informal education. The formal, I did animal science and agriculture economics undergrad at the University of Kentucky, which is where I was from. I'm a proud land grant supporter. So I did that. I went on and got my master's at the University of Arkansas, also in agricultural economics. I really love learning in every form possible. I also earned a master's in rural development from the University of Ghent in Belgium. So I spent some time abroad and did my master's thesis research on food security. So I spent some time in West Africa, Senegal, and Ghana. After that, I was kind of burnt out on school though, and wanted to work for a little bit, maybe see how I might be able to apply what I had learned in a formal setting, in a professional setting. So I went and worked for the University of Maryland Extension, which means I got to work with producers, and it allowed me to apply what I had spent some time in the classroom learning. I really, really loved it. It was on grant funding, which is what we call soft funding in the academic world, which means once it's spent, it's gone. And so my job disappeared once the grant funding disappeared. The University of Arkansas happened to have an instructor position open up at that time, and I loved learning. And so I thought, well, maybe I would like teaching as well. So I went back and worked at the University of Arkansas for 2 years, and I taught 5 different classes there in the ag business department, and I really loved it. And thankful for mentors there who basically came to me and said, you need to go get your PhD so that you can do this full-time and be compensated for your skills. So they basically kind of kicked me out. That's how I ended up at Kansas State, where I got my PhD in agricultural economics. And I finished up just last year. I defended July 26th and started my job at Oklahoma State July 31st. So that was a pretty quick turnaround. I still feel like I'm still in K-State sometimes in the back of my head and accidentally put my K-State email on things all the time. But that's where I'm at now as an assistant professor. My appointment is 65% teaching, 35% research. So it's a nice split. It's kind of an ideal position. I'm very lucky because academic positions are hard to come by, and I managed to get a pretty good spot.
That is awesome, Dr. Scheer. Thank you for sharing that. Dylan.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Dylan Howe. As he mentioned, I'm an interior designer in New York City, doing corporate interiors, Perkins & Will. Similar to Dr. Colburn, I'm a Kansas native myself. I was actually also born in Manhattan, but was raised in a small rural town called Gypsum, Kansas, about an hour and a half away. And originally, I wanted to go into video game design until as a sophomore in high school, one of my best friends was like, I think I'm going to go to architecture school. And I was like, oh, that sounds like way more of an actual job. And this was back before, video games had exploded. But I was like, oh, that sounds like it's just really fascinating. You can do all the same like manipulation of physics and everything but just in the real world. So I was really fascinated instantly. So when I was weighing options for school, I was in a similar position where I didn't necessarily have the academic acumen to bring me to a far off place or the financial capabilities either. So I was really fortunate to find out that Kansas State's architecture program is one of the best in the country. And specifically their interior architecture program it's kind of a unique program within itself, but as far as graduate programs for interior architecture go, it's like the second best in the country and the first in the state schools. So just the stars aligned in that way, and I was very happy to then learn, and I don't think I necessarily took or understood the whole value of my education as it was happening to me, but it's an accelerated 5-year master's program. So this is probably a little different from my other 3 panelists here in that I only went to school for 5 years. It was very intense, which is probably very similar to your experiences. But my undergrad was rather unceremonious when it came to an end. Basically we just, because it was an accelerated master's program, we understood that, we weren't going to walk at graduation for undergrad or any of that. We just wanted to get the requirements out of the way and keep rolling. So as a part of that grad school experience, I actually had the opportunity to do, and we called it an internship, but I learned through the process, it's effectively an externship where I was working full-time for an architecture firm in New York City. And what kind of led me there was, after studying abroad in Denmark and some other places in Europe, I was really fascinated by the diversity of experience and culture that I was able to kind of soak in when I was there in my short time. So I was like, I'm gonna go somewhere big, somewhere scary and diverse and challenging, and New York City was the perfect fit. So going from the Little Apple to the Big Apple for the internship, and then I ended up coming back after I finished grad school, where I then got my interior design licensure, and later this year I'll be taking the architectural licensure exams as well.
Awesome. Thank you all for those introductions and giving us a little bit of introductions onto what you have going on and what you've done. Another question that has been asked, or would like to be asked, is what was your background prior to KSU? Now, Dylan, I know you mentioned you were in a 5-year track, so your experience was here at Kansas State, but for our other panelists as well, what students would like to know is what were some previous degrees earned? Dr. Coburn, I know you mentioned yours, as well as Dr. Shear, but some students would also like to know what was some campus involvements that you were a part of, and what were some internships and jobs you had that kind of helped you mold the decision to where you're at currently? And Dylan, we'll start with you, although you mentioned a good chunk of that in your intro.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll keep mine brief. I was involved in the Student Union Ambassadors for a little while as far as on-campus involvement. Also, just highly advocate joining any professional organizations that contribute to your field. So I somehow backed myself into the president's role for AIAS when I was a student here, which is the Architects Institute of America student version. So I was the president of that for 2 or 3 years when I was here, and also some interior design programs as well.
Dr. Shear?
Yeah, so as far as campus involvement, I have a problem saying no. And I really like to experience new things. And so I found myself involved in a lot of different things, all the way from undergrad, all the way up through my graduate studies. I'll focus obviously on graduate studies because I think that's what matters. I was pretty active with the Graduate Student Council there at K-State. I got to work with some of the people on this call, which was fun. I was also, as Dylan mentioned, our association for my field, agriculture economics. We have a national organization, and we also have a specific organization, the kind of section that's focused just on graduate students. So I was really heavily involved in those. I guess you call it an organization. The graduate student section was an organization. But a lot of times I just found myself, I might not have been involved directly. I was with Graduate Student Council and I was with our section, but I also found myself just watching. I would join a meeting that I wasn't sure about, or I would join a session, or just to learn about it. So I wouldn't have necessarily been directly involved in it, but I'm finding out now in my position where I am now at Oklahoma State, that I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I lurked in that meeting and learned how the process works. Or I met certain people that I'm like, oh, you're from this. So you don't have to necessarily be like, president of the organization to be like, to find that usefulness payout later. But yeah, so find ways to get involved in your professional association or student organizations on campus.
Great advice, Dr. Shear. Thank you for that. Dr. Colburn?
Yeah, so I was also involved in Graduate Student Council. The thing that worked out really well, so as I mentioned, I was in the sociology program here at K-State, and we have our own graduate student association within our field. And so it worked out because I was like the Graduate Student Council liaison. And so I was going to these meetings for 2 purposes. And then my involvement with GSC, I was also then a part of the Rec Council, which worked out really well. All throughout my undergrad and then my master's program, I worked at the Rec here on campus. And so that was just like a make sense fit for me, just because I already knew everybody who was part of the meetings. And it was nice just to kind of have a voice for graduate students within those meetings as well. So I also did some work outside of campus. And so, as I mentioned, my field of study really relies upon criminology and the criminal justice system. And so I am on a team here in Manhattan called the Fair and Impartial Policing Working Group. And so I work with a small group of Riley County citizens, and we work with RCPD as well, and basically just talk about issues in the community in terms of policing. If there are any, community concerns, we talk about those. It's really been a lot of productive conversations. I know, policing in general within the media, in society, has been pretty controversial for a lot of really valid reasons. And I like having a seat at the table. And so that's been something that's just been really important to me. And I feel really proud to, like I said, have a seat there. I did not do any internships because that wasn't a requirement for my field. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but as part of, well, actually, I shouldn't even say as part of my research, it was kind of a serendipitous thing, but I was sent something of like, hey, we know that you're interested in doing your dissertation on the military and relationships in the military and conflict within military relationships. And one of my friends sent me a job ad for New York University, who they were trying to find someone to work out at Fort Riley and finish up a 3-year grant project. And as I said, it was a very serendipitous thing. I wasn't looking for it at all, but I ended up getting that position, and I worked out at Fort Riley for about 8 months in their behavioral health unit. And I'll talk about that more later, like I said, but that really was a jump start for then me being able to complete my dissertation. So all good things. But yeah, I like Dr. Shearer, I kind of have a hard time saying no, and I'm interested in a lot of things. And so I kind of like to have my hand in a lot of different pots, and I don't like being bored. So I intentionally made myself incredibly busy, and being a graduate student, you're already super pressed for time, but I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess, but it was all good. So.
Yes, that sounds like some great work. Thank you for sharing all that, Dr. Colburn. And Dr. Weaker, you're next.
So my academic background is actually in psychology, like Dr. Colburn. So my first degree was in psychology, and my second degree, my master's degree is in clinical psychology. I'm from Nigeria, so I had both degrees in Nigeria before coming here. And when I finished my master's degree, I started a nonprofit organization called Postpartum Support Network Africa. And essentially, the organization, I set up the organization to raise awareness about postpartum depression and other maternal mental health challenges that women face after childbirth. Not just women, men also face these challenges. Because we're beginning to see more men struggle with, postpartum anxiety and depression too. So that's my entry point into leadership. I was running the organization, engaging communities to make progress on this challenge. And I got a chance to come to the United States in 2017 on a program called the Mandela Washington Fellowship. And I was posted here at K-State. So I had this chance to do the 6 weeks Leadership Institute at Kansas State at the Staley School of Leadership. That's where my interest in leading change from an academic perspective started to grow. So I got really interested in how do we teach people to lead change effectively. And honestly, that's how my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation revolves around understanding how social change happens and how nonprofit organizations lead social change, specifically in the mental health space. So that's my background. In terms of academic, on-campus involvement when I was an undergrad, we don't have, in Nigeria, we don't have as much opportunities as students here do. But I did know very early that I wanted to become a professor. I think that, at 2021, when I was 21 years old, I read this book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And in that book, he articulated that, to do anything properly and do it really well, and to be at the top of your game, you need to have put in 10,000 hours of practice. So I knew that I needed to start getting my 10,000 hours in. So when my friends were competing to become, president of the SGA and general secretary of the SGA, I wanted to be the study director. Because that involved, putting together tutorials for undergraduate students and teaching classes to help them prepare for exams and things like that. So that was my entry point into teaching. I started to do that very early on as an undergrad. And I loved it, you know, I loved it so much, and I knew that it was something I was going to do. So after my PhD, it was just a really easy decision for me to go into academia. And I'll talk more about how I decided, you know, whether to go the research route or go the teaching route as we progress. But that's basically my background before coming to K-State. And I think that previous experience really helped me, because it's one thing to teach, to learn about leadership theoretically. It's another thing to do it, you know, to engage communities. And all of that knowledge is helping me now as I prepare my students to engage communities to make progress on challenges facing communities here at UGA.
I love that. That's really good testimony there, Dr. Working. Thank you very much. So the next question, if you participated in a graduate apprenticeship or practicum, could you highlight the skills gained in those experiences that were transferable to the career job that you are in now? Some of you touched on that, but just a little bit more in depth as far as what transferable skills were the ones that you felt were highlighted the most. And we will start with Dr. Colburn.
Yes. So like I mentioned, I did not do an internship, but I had the opportunity to help complete a research project out at Fort Riley. So again, the study was funded through NYU, but I got permission from my major professor to essentially kind of take a break from teaching, because that was what I had been doing, to take on this role, because we felt that it could lead to great connections, but also just to really hone in on what I was wanting to study for my dissertation. And so that work at Fort Riley, I was working in the Family Advocacy Program office, which is essentially their domestic violence office. So the office is full of social workers. They're civilians, but there's a lot of involvement with active duty soldiers, but also leadership. It was a very hands-on role. And that was kind of the biggest thing for me, because my experience with research up to that point was a lot of just like typing on a computer, reading studies, but not feeling very involved in the research portion. And my master's thesis, I was again just sitting in front of a computer doing a lot of analysis, but not feeling a whole lot of like personal investment. And so working at Fort Riley was just such an impactful experience for me, because I got to sit in on these meetings with the deputy garrison commander, and we were going over specific cases, and commanders were in there, and we had social workers and JAG, which is Army lawyers for the people who don't know what those are. We had military police and stuff, and it was just, I was sitting there with my jaw hanging open half the time, because I was like, this is so cool. And just to again have a seat at the table and just see how these things were addressed, and what services were available, but also weren't available. And it really lit a fire in me to want to continue being involved in studies directly related to the military. Because that was just kind of like a personal connection. My dad was in the military, and I don't know, living in Manhattan my entire life, Fort Riley is obviously just right down the road. And I don't know, it mattered to me. And I guess I found a question that I really wanted to have an answer to. And so I just kind of dove in head first, and it was just such a really incredible opportunity for me. But in terms of what I took from it, like I said, being involved was so important, actually feeling like I was getting my hands dirty, getting able to talk to, victims of domestic violence, but also listening into conversations with commanders and, military leadership, and kind of getting a better idea of what the issues were in being able to provide care. Because it's not always a thing where, oh, we're so callous, we don't want you to get the help you need. A lot of it comes down to, we need to be 85% deployable. And so how are we going to make that possible? And it just, like I said, kind of led into a great opportunity for me to figure out what exactly I wanted to study for my dissertation. And again, it kind of lit a passion for me with doing advocacy work, which directly then relates to the job that I do now. Obviously, I'm not working with service members, but of course we do have military connected folks here at K-State. And so sometimes I still have a little bit of a cross there, but yeah, the advocacy was probably the biggest thing, and just being able to feel like I was having a direct impact on people, which was just a really special feeling.
That's so awesome, Dr. Colburn. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Wiereich.
So, I mean, for international students, yeah, it's really hard to get internships, except you like in STEM, and even those are like really hard to come by. So, I think for us, the internship really is the graduate assistantship. That experience you get being a graduate assistant is really valuable. I know it was really valuable for me. So I got to serve as an instructor on the record. So when I was coming to do my PhD, I was told that I'll get a chance to teach public speaking, which is an introductory communications class that I found really valuable. I taught that for 2 years, and I cannot tell you how helpful that was for me to not only develop my capacity as a professor, as an instructor, but also just know how to manage classes and for one thing also like get that teaching evaluation in, because you really do not know if you're looking to get like academic jobs, you don't know how valuable it is to get those, teaching evaluations in very early. But as I continued my role here as a graduate assistant, opportunities came for me to take up more classes, to teach more, higher level classes, and I leaned into it. I know at the time it was not easy, teaching, 2-3 classes every semester, senior level classes, but I do think that experience was really valuable. And as I, sought to apply for jobs, having really great teaching evaluations just, kind of like set me apart and gave me an edge with my job applications. So I think that was a great experience. And also I had, experience with coordinating programs. Shout out to Dr. Priest, who's on this call, who was my major professor, always will be my major professor. And she connected me with a lot of opportunities, so I had a chance to work alongside her to, coordinate graduate leadership development programs. We worked together to put together like a leadership development program for African leaders, which we, implemented in Nigeria. So having that experience is just really, really valuable. Also had to do got to do some program with her around leadership development for leaders who are part of the Mandela Washington Fellowship, interestingly, that I was part of. But in 2019, I think, or 2019, we got a chance to host Mandela Washington Fellows here and also do some programming for them. So I think that those experiences was kind of like my own internship, was an opportunity for me to learn about the job that I was going to be doing, that I hope I'll be doing for the rest of my life. And just get that very valuable experience in. So that's kind of like my experience.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing that. And yes, shout out to Dr. Priest. She's done some great work here on campus and for everyone else as well. Dylan, up next.
Yeah, so I covered this a little bit in my intro, but I had what I would qualify as an externship where I was working full-time for 8 months. And it was not easy to get that job in New York, having relatively no connections there. And at the time, Zoom was around, but it definitely was not prolifically used. So a virtual interview was few and far between. And I think similar to some of my panelists' experiences in doing the actual work is such an important role in learning and growing in the field of architecture. It really is a practice. It's something that you learn over your entire career and your entire life. So I would say highly recommend getting practical experience wherever you can, whether that's through a more traditional avenue of going through internship, externship, or I don't usually advocate for apprenticeships because I think sometimes it can exploit your free IP and labor. So definitely try and see if you can get paid if possible, or just at least recognize the value that you're getting out of it as well. So definitely advocate for that. And generally, I kind of think of it in these three buckets. I think undergrad kind of taught me how to think critically and how to learn. Grad school taught me how to really go way deeper into a specific subject or interest and start to formulate my own thoughts around like a research-based or research-backed hypothesis. And then practical work is about applying all of those things to real-world scenarios. So it's creative problem solving, critical thinking, and bringing research and expertise to solving a problem.
Thank you for that. That's really good stuff there. And Dr. Shear.
Yeah, so I'm glad Dylan said that, because I think the practicum aspect is kind of where I'm currently trying to advocate and encourage K-State, my old department, to incorporate a practicum into our PhD program. It doesn't need to be required, I don't think, but I do think applying those skills that you've gained is really, really important. And that's what transfers right to your career, or hopefully should transfer to your career, especially for people who are looking to pursue jobs in academia, which obviously I was at the time. And a lot of those positions require you to teach. And I was constantly like, is someone gonna help me learn how to teach? Like, I had experience teaching beforehand, but that didn't mean that I was good at it. Like, that just meant I had done it. And so having evals is good, but am I doing a good job? And so I will say the first thing I think students need to do is, if your department doesn't have a practicum or apprenticeship, don't use that as your excuse for like not making one for yourself or finding ways to do that yourself. And so I did that while I was at K-State, and I utilized the Teaching and Learning Center there. You can earn a graduate student certificate in teaching. You can ask to teach, you can ask to shadow, find a mentor who's a really good teacher, and talk to them. So you can kind of create your own practicum, if you will, which is kind of what I did. I said, I want to teach, please put me back in the classroom. And I paired that up with the Teaching and Learning Center and got to do some good stuff. So by doing that, I was teaching, doing my research, and taking classes, and then was also in some student organizations. And so that practical experience of learning how to handle time management was extremely important. And I find that even more so, like, everyone says, oh, time management skills, it gets worse. Like, I'm teaching 3 classes, well, I guess technically 4 classes this semester. I have like 400 and something students, plus research, plus I sit on committee, you know, the normal stuff. So you've really got to be good at that. And I'm so grateful that I don't know how to say no. So I learned very early on in life how to manage my time. But also just having that entrepreneurial spirit of like, if I don't know something, or if I am lacking this particular experience, I will go figure out how to get it, or I will go ask somebody. And I learned that very early on in my grad student time. And so that was really useful. And then also participating in, like, I knew I wanted to go into academia, and that meant I would more than likely be mentoring students. And that scared me, because I was like, oh gosh, I don't even know how to mentor myself, much less the next generation. And so I made sure I participated in any training that came across, or any sort of leadership development opportunities. I did some with Dr. Priest, and it was really good skills that you can translate to like your career, especially if that's in academia. You've got to be aware of people around you, and when there's an issue, it might be because your priorities aren't aligning. We got to learn how to talk about that and be comfortable with that. Mentorship is really important. So I got a lot of those skills sprinkled in, but not by a formal structure. I had to go kind of do them myself. So do that. You don't have to do all of it, but do 1 or 2. And I think it will really benefit you in your career.
Dr. Shear, that is great, great, great. Thank you to all of you for that one. As a graduate student myself, I'm taking notes over here, just trying to get as much information as I can as well. And time management is one of those, Dr. Shear, that you hit right on, where as I'm getting into my second semester, I'm just trying to figure out where the time from January to now kind of went. So I definitely get that. Thank you so much. We'll start to transition to the next question. It talks about the job application process. So the next question is, when did you start applying for jobs, and what resources helped you when searching and applying for these jobs? And I'll start with Dr. Shear.
Yeah, so academia is a little weird in how we do jobs. And so just know that whatever I'm saying was just my particular environment and experience. And so it may not fit your field or whatever. But I started looking for jobs a year before I was supposed to graduate, specifically because academic jobs are few and far between, and the interview process for them also takes a long time. So I started about a year ahead of time. So it would have been like summer and fall of 2020. And I spent that fall applying paperwork, round one, that type of stuff. And then they give you round two if you made it, was in that 2021 spring. So I knew by the end of spring in 2021 where I had offers and that type of a thing. As far as resources that helped me, my advisor and I had identified some other mentors along the way during my experience, and they were excellent resources. Our department also did a pretty good job with walking us, those of us that were pursuing academia, through that process, what it looks like. The components, they gave examples of cover letters, examples of interview questions, things to expect. So our department was a really good resource. You can also find a lot of just really good resources on the internet for just, Google, right? Google got us all through our school. So you can find a lot of really good resources online. And so that was mainly my resources, were people I knew and Google.
Awesome. You can always trust old Google.
Old
Dylan, what about you?
Yes, sir. Am I muted? Perfect. Yeah, so I want to kind of echo some of what Dr. Scheer was saying, where I think it's incredibly important to do a lot of self-evaluating early on in editing to find out what you want, right? Like, that's the eternal question, and I'll probably never get it completely right. But what is it that I want? And I think it's important to evaluate short-term and long-term, maybe even set up some goals, and evaluate what aligns with your values. I think we're at a point in time right now, especially, and this was not the case when I came out of school necessarily, and I know it kind of ebbs and flows, but the employee has a lot of leverage right now. So if you can find organizations that really align with your values and kind of meet some of those short and long-term goals, I think it's the process that's really important in determining, what you want to apply for. And, like I said, this changes all the time. I'm in like a perpetual identity crisis, is what I tell people. But I think it's helpful always to go through the exercise of kind of writing your own job description and then weighing your options against that, right? And whether that's using websites like LinkedIn or Glassdoor to kind of evaluate and get some feedback from people who are or have worked there, or whether it's help from your universities, through alumni groups or career centers, or again, those professional organizations. A lot of my connections, and we'll talk about networking a little later, but a lot of my connections came out of just going to events through those professional organizations that all kind of start to connect the dots and just give me an idea of what is out there. And it helped me really make clear to myself what I thought I wanted anyway. And again, that evolves every couple of years for me. So even now I'm saying, okay, well, where do I want to be next year, in 5 years? And is where I'm at right now going to get me there?
Thank you for that. And really, really good stuff there. Dr. Ekwerike, yes, please, you next.
Okay, so my experience is similar to Dr. Scheer because it's academia. So basically, I applied a year before, and I had similar resources. My professors were amazing. I remember talking about Googling stuff, Dr. Scheer. Yeah, I went on Google to look for an example of what an academic cover letter would look like. Yeah. And all of the advice in higher ed jobs is like 1-page cover letter, just make it really concise and all that cool stuff. Well, I did that before I started speaking to my professors, and I realized that I was making a mistake. The first time my professor sent me his cover letter, it was almost 4 pages. I'm like, yo, if this guy who's a white male in America has a 4-page cover letter, then what am I doing? You know, it's like I had to fix up. So I realized that even though Google has like resources, that sometimes it's important to like, you know, learn from people who've walked the path, you know, people who have had some experience doing it. And I remember reading Dr. Priest's cover letter, because she shared her cover letter with me too, and I was like, okay, I probably have some things to work on. And so I think having that support, having professors who genuinely care about you and want you to succeed, is important, and leaning on them, you know, and the experiences they've had is crucial. That was crucial for me. But also, you know, your peers. I think people, I mean, many students tend to overlook their peers. I have, you know, because, you know, I think I was really privileged to have like a cohort of really amazing people who I did my PhD with. And so I was leaning on them, you know, we're leaning on each other, reviewing each other's materials, you know, pointing each other to resources that would help us get positions after we finish our program, you know. And my friends just kept sending me resources. You know, they knew the kind of jobs I was looking for, and every time they stumble on something, they'll send it across to me. We could talk about. I mean, I had them to talk through, you know, my interview. My interviews and preparing for my interviews. I mean, I literally had two of my professors, you know, walk me through the whole process step by step. When I was applying for this job, made out time, you know, I had Dr. Priest, of course, I had, you know, Dr. Cleaver, Brandon Cleaver, and then Dr. Paul, who's the head of the Department of Communication Studies, just really make out time to sit down with me and talk through the whole process. From how do you write the cover letter to how do you negotiate, you know, and ensure that no one lowballs you, things like that, just really crucial to lean into those supports if you have them, you know, because I also want to understand that everybody on this call is going to have professors like, you know, like ours. So, but if you do have people who genuinely care about you, lean into that support that you can get from them.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I just want to echo a lot of that. Definitely, as Dylan mentioned, and as you mentioned also, Doctor, that it's really great to create and establish those relationships with your professors so that you can have that guidance. But for our students who are watching, just know that, you know, outside of using your professors, there's also resources, as Dylan mentioned, here on campus, such as the Career Center and the associate directors who can help you, you know, with some of those searches and resume and interview prep as well. So great stuff. Thank you for all of those. The next question, what during the job interview process, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Colburn, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
No, you are just fine. I am going to just come right out and say that I was actually trying to get an academic job and it didn't work out for me. So I, much the same as Dr. Shear said, I started applying for jobs a year ahead of when I was supposed to graduate. So I was starting to work on all of my application materials in like summer of 2019 with an anticipated graduation date of like May 2020. And obviously we all know what happened in March of 2020, which completely tanked the academic job market, and that sucked. And so I applied for, I don't know, so many jobs. Like I had an Excel file of all these universities I had applied to, some that were just like totally outside of my reach, but some I was like, I should be considered here, you know, like reasonably. And it, like the academic job market completely tanked in 2020. And that was really hard for me because up until that point, you know, I had played by the rules. I had done my education, I took my comps, I was situated very well within my graduate program. I had published, I was doing all the good extracurriculars, I was taking on classes that, you know, are typically given to professors, but I had raised my hand and said, please let me teach more. You know, I had this experience at Fort Riley. I did all the right things, but unfortunately for me, and I found this out kind of later, and I don't fault anybody for this, let me be clear. It is hard to get a criminology job when you come from a sociology field. Okay, so basically what that looks like is I think a lot of other universities don't always trust that my academic training is going to pan well into teaching criminology specific classes, even though I had done that. So the fact that I graduated out of a sociology program, it seemed too basic to then be teaching within a specialized field like criminology. Hopefully that distinction makes sense. But anyway, so I was getting overlooked for a lot of positions because they would just see K-State sociology and they were like, well, she's not a crim person. And so I kind of had like a small identity crisis, and, you know, I felt really sad for myself. And then I started networking basically. And I was like, okay, well, if academia isn't going to pan out for me, what else am I interested in? And I again thought back to my experience at Fort Riley, and there weren't positions available at the time. Fort Riley, like any government position, they can be pretty specific about, you know, the criteria for which they hire. And so they don't always hire civilians, and that's okay. And so I was looking at just kind of figuring out what other things I was interested in. And I got connected to Melissa Mosier, who is the victim advocate at RCPD. And she, I know we're going to talk about networking later, but she was a huge resource for me in terms of figuring out like, okay, if I'm not going to do academia, what else am I really interested in? Okay, advocacy, what does that look like in a real sense? And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know, I'm still a little, you know, hurt by the fact that I didn't go into the field that I was kind of, you know, promised, but it all works out, and I'm very happy to be doing what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I guess for anybody who may not feel that academia is exactly what they want to do, there are other options, and you can absolutely still use your advanced degrees to make a difference. So I guess that's my little addition.
Yes, thank you for that. And again, I apologize for kind of speeding through, but I definitely really enjoying these answers and conversations that we're having. I wanted to take a pause real quick because one of our panelists, Dr. Shears, will be leaving us a little bit here soon. So I wanted to ask if anybody, any of the guests had any questions to ask Dr. Shear prior to her leaving in regards to any of the responses that she's given us. Anyone in the audience?
I've answered a couple in the chat that people direct messaged, and I dropped some links in there for those people. So everyone might be okay.
Okay, perfect. Well, then what I'll do next then, Dr. Shear, is I'll start the next question for you, although I had planned with Dr. Ewerike. So that way, after you answer this question, ma'am, you can go on ahead and drop the Zoom. And again, thank you for being here, ma'am. So the next question, what during the job interview process solidified your decision to accept an offer from the organization? Did you learn anything that made you reject offers from others?
I will try to answer this as delicately as possible. So accepting the offer, so for Oklahoma State, accepting the offer, I have to back up to when I was applying to grad school as well, because I had also applied to Oklahoma State here. And when I came and interviewed for Oklahoma State for graduate school, I really enjoyed everyone I met. Everyone was very kind. It's similar to K-State. They're both good livestock schools, but a faculty member here explicitly said to me, he said, you go to K-State, you get a PhD, and when you graduate, you come work for us. And he was very honest about that, because he's like, well, technically K-State's ranked higher than we are in this program. I think you'd be set better if you went to K-State, but we want you. And that stuck out to me, like he cares about me before like my career, and not just like, oh, we're trying to recruit you here. And that stuck out to me immediately during grad school. And then when Oklahoma State opened this position and I put my application in, that same faculty member emailed me and said, and the whole email just said, told you. And I really appreciated that, you know, that someone remembered me. Like that stuck out to me. I'm easily swayed by compliments. So that was really nice to see. Oklahoma State's just a good school. They offered a really competitive salary. The Midwest in my field of economics pays really well. Obviously, my family's all back in Kentucky. Ideally, that's where I want to end up. But in academia, jobs are few and far between. You go where there's a spot that has your area. And it just so happened that Oklahoma State was one of the ones with a good offer. So, and they're a great school and I love the people, but I chose it because of the faculty here that I wanted to work with. As far as rejecting other offers, I was lucky on the academic market that apparently everyone that was a land grant university was looking for someone in agribusiness and farm management. So I lucked out. It's a crapshoot in academia, like it's just totally random. And my year was a good year for my field. And so I had the benefit of interviewing at several other land grants. And in academia, you need to pay attention to your title and your title's promotion track. We've seen a shift change in how we promote teaching faculty. And so you might be on a separate track from a research teaching faculty. So we have tenure track, and then we have like a teaching tenure track. And in some departments, the teaching tenure track is looked down upon and treated, they don't get votes in faculty meetings for certain things. And it creates a dynamic that I'm not sure everyone loves. I don't love that because I think everybody brings a particular value to the table and that everyone should be heard at that particular location or time. And so it came very clear that some of the positions, well, you're not full tenure track. A couple of times during the interview, oh, well, I don't really need to talk to you because you and I are not in the same. And that to me was like red flag, like absolutely not, I'm out. No, thank you. I'll move on to the next school. So just make sure you pay attention to kind of the culture and how people are incorporated into that promotion and tenure thing. So that kind of put me off. I will skip and go to the last question where you're going to ask about things for negotiations, because that also ties into reasons why I accepted or rejected other people's offers, was because if they didn't play ball with me in negotiations, that was a red flag. And so a couple of times I'm asking for like these are low requests. Like I'd like moving costs. I've been in grad school for 4 years. I don't have a spare dollar. So can you cover moving expenses? And if they shut me down at moving expenses, I usually immediately rejected the offer the next day. So that's like a low fruit to ask for, is please pay for my moving expenses. Then I moved on and asked for things like computer, startup salary, cover my grad students for a year while I get established, pay for my licensing, because in economics, we need a lot of software to do research, and that software is really expensive. So can you also pay for my licensing? Office furniture, again, that was a low hanging fruit I asked for. Like, are you going to furnish my office? Make sure I have a chair, things like that. And if they weren't willing to do one or two, or at least pretend, because a lot of times in academia, if it's not available, it's not available. But if they at least pretended to be like, well, we'll ask. If they just said no and didn't even try to have some give and take, I would rather go home and be jobless and live on the farm than work with a place where I don't feel like they're trying to meet me halfway. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for that and being transparent. I think, students need to hear that, especially with having those conversations come up pretty soon with some students graduating and probably already having those conversations. So thank you so much, Dr. Sheeran. Thank you for answering those two prior. Thank you for being here. And we hope you have a great weekend. You're more than welcome to stay and hang out until you have to leave, or, I felt that this would be a good point for you with these two questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Of course. You take care, ma'am.
You too.
And I will go next on the same question, and I'll ask it again. What during the job interview process solidified your decision to accept an offer from the organization? And did you learn anything that made you reject job offers from others? Dr. Ekwerike.
Cesar, I have to give it to you. I mean, progressively, you've pronounced my name better, so great job.
Yes.
So I was torn, when I finished my PhD, I was a bit torn, do I want to go the research professor route, or do I want to go like the teaching professor route? And for, you know, the reasons that, you know, Dr. Shea highlighted just now, it's like in academia, the research professors tend to have like more privileges than the teaching professors, yeah. And I was aware of that, but I also did not want that to be my motivation for taking the job, you know, because I realized very early that I did not want to, you know, Dr. Priest is on the call, and so and I love her to bits, but I've seen professors and, you know, research professors and you know, the strain and the stress of, you know, this publish or perish culture that we have in higher ed, and I did not want to really be a part of it. I also did not feel like, you know, I had the same satisfaction, you know, with teaching that I got from research. So, but it was hard still. But I also wanted to compete with the best of the best, you know, play with the big boys and all of those things. So, I mean, I got 2 jobs. I got, you know, a research professor job at Northeastern Illinois University, and I got the job here at University of Georgia. And I sat down with my professors. I remember a conversation with one of my professors, Brandon, and he told me clearly. He said, you know, do what you enjoy. And honestly, what I enjoy is teaching. So having that conversation, just, you know, being honest with myself and holding to purpose, I think is an important thing, just holding to purpose. So I knew that I always wanted to teach. I wanted to spend more time teaching. I like research, but I did not want to be under the pressure of like publishing or perishing in higher ed. And so that helped me make my decision to come to UGA. Besides the fact that UGA, of course, pay more too than the other school I was going to go to, and it was a college of business. So the University of Georgia's College of Business is top 15 colleges of businesses in the country. So I thought that was great. You know, I sat down again with my professors and we talked about the opportunities I'd get here if I moved to University of Georgia, you know, and they were right. And I wanted to live in a place where I had proximity to African food, because that's very important for me. And, you know, being in Athens, Georgia, Atlanta's just an hour away. There's, you know, huge international airports and more diversity there that I've gotten any other place. So that was also very important to me. And then finally, the faculty members, you know, that I met when I came here. Honestly, as a Black man in America, you are conscious of the discourse around hiring. Yes, like you don't want to be the diversity hire. And so I remember, you know, when I came for my on-campus interview and I was waiting with the head of the department and some other faculty member in a restaurant having dinner, and one of the faculty members just talked about how, you know, they'll be really delighted to have me, and they're sure that, you know, I would have multiple offers. And so I asked them like, yo, so why do you think I might have multiple offers? And they're like, you know, you stand out as a candidate. And I told them clearly, I don't want to be the diversity hire. And, you know, and you could see their faces, you know, they're like, oh, actually, no, we don't want you because, you know, you're Black. We want you because we've seen you teach, we've seen your TVALs, and we've seen the comments your students made on your TVALs. And we really want you to come down to UGA and work with us. And that the honesty there, and the fact that, you know, they were not defensive, they did not make me, you know, feel silly for the question. I mean, for being clear that I did not want to be diversity hire. Just really warmed my heart and made me say, okay, this guy's like straight up with me. And, you know, honestly, for me, having people who are from diverse backgrounds in the department also helped. So I did not want to go to a place where I'll be the only Black dude in the college. Doesn't feel good. I put that out there now. So for folks of color who are on this call, honestly, I mean, just check to make sure that there are people of color there, because you're not going to like it if you spend 6 years in the place. You're just the only one there. It doesn't feel good at all. So, you know, on the faculty, there's an African-American professor who's just, you know, he's been doing this for a long time. He's a bit older. I knew I was going to, you know, have a great mentor in him. And he's proven to be an amazing mentor. Made my life a lot easier here. And also the benefits that came with the job also just made it really easy. So while I was going to be a teaching professor, you know, I was going to get a graduate assistant. I had, you know, most of the pecs, all of the things I would ask for, honestly. I did not even have to negotiate. Talking about negotiation, when I saw the offer, I was like, yo, it doesn't get any better than this. They were willing to pay for my travel. They gave me a startup fund. I think it's interesting that Dr. Shea talked about having to ask for like an office chair. I had a huge office, really well furnished, you know, it's like, everything I thought I would need. You know, when I saw the offer I shared with my professors, they're like, "Yo, bro, you better take that offer. It doesn't get better than that." So I mean, it was easier to take the offer after factoring all of these things. You know, the environment was great. You know, there's proximity to African food. You know, there's diverse faculty, faculty members from diverse backgrounds, and you know, the pay being great. So it was an easy pick. And then of course, it was what I've always wanted. You know, teaching, and it also offered me a chance to grow. So like Dr. Shia mentioned, she talked about like some, you know, some teaching professors not having opportunities to grow for promotion. This thankfully had my job has had an opportunity for promotion. So it was like a teaching track kind of thing. And so they spelled out clearly that, you know, there'll be room for growth. And so that was very appealing for me too. And honestly, I'm thankful I'm here. Besides the fact that the other job was going to be in Chicago, and I don't do well with the cold and the wind. So I'm glad I made my decision to come here.
Thank you very much for that. And yes, I kind of struggling with the cold myself. So I totally understand that. Dr. Colburn.
Yes. Okay. So I would say it's so basic, maybe. I don't even know. But the culture of the office, I was really drawn to here at CARE. I know I've talked about Fort Riley quite a bit. I do work at K-State, but I really was drawn to the culture of the office. You know, the folks who work here are just like so committed to the job that we do in terms of advocacy, but we also have a prevention side. I was surrounded by like-minded individuals, and that was just a really big draw for me. I will say a lot of us have very strong personalities. And so I was a little bit concerned of like, how's that going to go? But at the same time, I mean, it's really been awesome. I have a lot of leeway in terms of how I do my job. And I don't know, I probably get away with way more than I should, but it's been great to have those opportunities. I mean, I get to go to conferences. I still get to be involved in a lot of academia type work, even though I'm not specifically in that realm. I was given the opportunity to adjunct for last semester and also this semester. So that was a pretty cool addition, but obviously that didn't happen during the job interview. So a lot of just like feeling out what the culture was. I knew that I was coming into the job at an advantage because you absolutely do not have to have a PhD to do the job I do, but it's absolutely an advantage. And so I had a little bit more negotiation power in terms of what I wanted out of this job. And I would say I've definitely been able to do that. I mean, I didn't have to reject any other job offers. I had applied for a job at Fort Riley at the time, but by the time things had progressed with that one, I had already accepted the job at K-State. And so it was kind of just a very easy let go on both sides with that other job. And so, yeah, I mean, my answer is a lot shorter, but just in general, it was important to me to like the people I was working with and to be surrounded by folks who were just as passionate about the work as I was.
Thank you for that, Dr. Colburn. That's okay that it's shorter. You know, talking about the culture of the office and just finding a place where you feel you fit in is great information for the students to know. Awesome. And Dylan.
Yeah, I'll say in the beginning it was a little tough. You know, they're like, we want an entry-level position with 4 years of experience, and I was like, okay, that already is an oxymoron, right? It doesn't make sense. So I ended up taking an opportunity that would get me to New York City. That was my focus in the beginning because I understood it was going to be a little more difficult. So from there, I was really able to build more connections and grow my skill set by getting accredited through interior design licensure and just building my network there. So later on in my career, I did a lot of work to then find organizations that really do then align with my values and where I think, you know, I could continue to learn and grow. I found myself in a couple of different places in time where I felt a little stagnant and that I wasn't growing or learning effectively. So when I made my last job change, which is about 2.5 years ago now, I really took the time to find those places that I think reflected my values. So my current firm is deeply committed to sustainable building practices, which is something that I care a lot about. And we also are really committed to what we call JEDI, which is our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion practice. And I think, like Dr. Ekwerike mentioned, you have to look at the individuals within the organization, because everyone these days is promising a commitment to diversity or inclusion. But if you go onto the website and all the pictures are of straight white men, you know, that's another red flag, right? So that's something that I've been really deliberate in finding a place that, you know, if I'm dedicating my life and time and my value to this organization, I want to make sure that, you know, we're forwarding the causes, we're pushing forward the causes that I care about. So that was a big focus of mine. And then rejecting, you know, I'm fortunate in that New York City right now, especially for my position, is everyone's hiring. So I have many recruiters reaching out like on a day-to-day basis, and I'm very deliberate. I'm like, okay, I'm in a position now where I don't necessarily have to, you know, take the highest bidder. I really want to put myself in that place where I have the right mentors in my organization, where I can continue to build those relationships and within our field that will get me to where I want to be. And I think there's something to be said about like recognizing your own value in this when you're weighing, because when you go to somewhere, I think they oftentimes want you to feel lucky that you have the opportunity to work somewhere. And I think it's really important to understand the incredible value that you as an individual are bringing to this organization. And I think that goes to Dr. Colburn's point too, about really fitting into the culture of a place. Like, every individual has value in creating the culture of a place. That's something that I've really dedicated some of my discretionary energy to, is trying to do some culture building and like fostering an environment where everyone can kind of bring their authentic selves to work, as opposed to like kind of fitting in this corporate bucket, right? So those are things that I advocate for when weighing job offers.
Thank you for that, Dylan. I think, you know, sharing, recognizing your own value is such a key important for some students, because, you know, the college, the grad school environment, especially if you came straight out of undergrad and then right into grad school, you get into that repetitive motion that it's just been school and work and campus involvement, that sometimes you don't recognize that value that you bring, because you feel that everything that you've done, you know, the candidate or the applicant next to you has done the same thing. So thank you, all three of you, for your testimonies on that answer, and really great. Dylan, I'll transition back to you with this next question. What role did networking play in the job search for your field?
Sorry, muted. I was going to say, if you couldn't tell by now, I love to talk and connect with people. I love joining panels like this, taking mentorship opportunities. And for me, really, there's no getting around it. I think that greatness is in the agency of others. And I'm where I'm at now because of the connections and relationships that I made in college and in my professional world. And architecture, like many other businesses, is very relationship driven. You really have to foster that trust and respect with the people that you're working with. And at the end of the day, rock stars hang out with rock stars. So when you start to find those people that you really connect with and click with, like, stick with them, grow together, and you can start to build your network in a really effective way to bringing to bringing you what you want and getting you into the positions that you want. I will say too, I've also had a lot of success in just asking for what I want. And I know that has like a lot of privilege baked into that statement, but just formalizing in words what you want and where you want to go will also kind of make it clear to the people around you what you're looking for. And a lot of people who have that power to help out, when they hear other people are interested in the types of things that they're doing, you know, people like helping other people. So I think there is a sort of natural tendency then to help lift people who are have shared interests. So definitely lean on alumni groups, lean on your professors, and don't be afraid to like cold connect with someone and slide into those professional DMs. I've done so much cold connecting on LinkedIn, it's absurd, and I've made so many good friends and connections just doing that. So when it comes to networking, I'll leave you with this. I live by a simple rule, and it's show up, follow up, and then follow through. And that'll get you so far in the networking game.
I like that, Dylan. Thank you so much. Dr. Colburn.
Yeah, I'm basically just going to reiterate a lot of what Dylan said. So like I said, after I had my little panic attack about not getting a job in academia, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And so again, I needed to kind of sit with myself for a little bit and figure out like, what else am I interested in? And like I said, I kind of honed in on this idea of like being directly involved with some sort of like advocacy service. And I basically like cold called Melissa Mosier, who works at RCPD. She is the victim advocate coordinator for RCPD. And I just contacted her and I was like, hey, you don't know me at all, but can you just talk to me about what you do, what your job is? You know, knowing that my background academically, at least, was in, you know, criminology, criminal justice, I was like, okay, well, maybe working at a police station or department might be a good fit. I don't know, you know, I was just going to put out feelers wherever I could. And she was super gracious, and we had a really great Zoom meeting, and she gave me a ton of information, you know, about like the credentialing process and how she got into the role. And you know, RCPD having a victim advocate is a newer thing. And so, you know, there wasn't going to be an opportunity for me to do like an internship, but she was so more than willing to, you know, let me shadow what she did and, you know, just bring me along as much as possible within her capabilities. I also reached out to a couple other advocacy services in Manhattan, again, just to put feelers out, because I just wanted to kind of figure out if I felt any sort of connection to any of those positions. In the fall of 2020, though, I was just focusing on finishing my dissertation. I wasn't teaching at the time, but I took another job off campus, totally unrelated. And Melissa actually emailed me out of the blue and said, hey, I see that CARE is hiring for a survivor advocate position, and I think you should apply. And I was like, amazing. Okay, awesome. Will you also serve as a reference? And she's like, of course I will. And I mean, I legitimately was not even like looking for a job at the time. I needed to, but I hadn't yet. And so it was, again, just like a really awesome thing that happened, because I didn't even know that job became available. And so without connecting with Melissa, I probably wouldn't have looked for it on my own, to be quite honest. I was just really focused on finishing my dissertation, and I kind of just had like those blinders on. But I mean, it worked out really beautifully because I defended in October, and CARE was super gracious in letting me finish out the job that I was doing at the time, because that was kind of a semester basis as well. And then I started at CARE in December. And so it worked out really beautifully. And I really have to credit Melissa for being so gracious and kind and willing to have a conversation. And again, a lot of what Dylan said, it's just putting yourself out there. There are so many people who are willing to have a conversation with you who don't expect anything in return. You know, if you send an email, a phone call, whatever it is, and just say, hey, can I just talk to you about your job? Can you give me some insight on what your day-to-day looks like? You know, what do you like about your job? What do you not like about your job? Just asking for insight. And I feel really confident that nobody's going to tell you no. You know, I think so many of us like the job that we do that it's not a problem to have a conversation with somebody, and you can even sweeten the deal by offering them a cup of coffee. I mean, it's like basic stuff. And so I think just, you know, kind of getting enough confidence to ask is the biggest thing, because people, I'm sure, are so willing to help you. You just have to feel confident enough to put yourself out there in the first place. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of, like I said, a small thing that turned into a big thing. And so yeah, networking is really important. You know, so much nowadays, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so making sure that you are trying to make connections with people in whatever way possible is going to benefit you long term.
Thank you for that, Dr. Colburn. Good. And Dr. Ekwerike, up next.
So I literally, the position I have now is literally a function of my relationship with my professors again. So when I was looking, like I said, I was initially looking for research professor positions, even though I knew that that's not what I really wanted. And a professor of mine, Brandon Cleaver, probably hear his name over and over again. Really amazing man. Saw a job posting on LinkedIn, you know, someone he's friends with here at UGA, who happens to be the director of my program, posted this opening, and he sent it to me immediately. He's like, hey, I found this really cool opportunity. I did my PhD at UGA. I think you'd be great for this program. And in fact, when I wrote my cover letter, I remember writing the cover letter for this position. I was on my couch on my phone. I wrote the cover letter on my phone, and I was like, my professor found this position and felt like I was going to be a good fit. And I think he's right. That was my introduction. Because it was just the truth. It was honestly just the truth. You know, he found the position. He says, you know, you'll be great for this. And I felt, okay, I'd agree. And so if I like to think that if I did not have a relationship with Dr. Cleaver and he did not have an idea of what I was looking for, or was not even thinking for me, I mean, thinking about me, thinking if he wasn't thinking about me, you know, that I would not have gotten this position now, because I wasn't really looking at UGA. I wasn't looking at, you know, this particular teaching position. So it was just down to it. But I mean, when it comes to networking, I mean, we run into people, we meet people who are in our departments from time to time, and sometimes it gets really awkward. Like, how do I build this relationship? And what I like to tell students is, one way you can really build relationships with people is by taking genuine personal interest in them. So, like, outside of the professional relationship, you know, get to know about people on a personal level. You know, what excites them, you know, what scares them the most about their life and their future. What do they enjoy doing? You know, allow the conversation initially center around them. People, you know, interestingly like to talk about themselves. So allow them feel great about themselves and center them as much as you can. And, you know, find opportunities for connection. Is when you learn about people, then you can find out about what what you all might have in common. So just knowing that, you know, what people enjoy doing, plugging yourself into it can allow you to build those relationships. And when you have those relationships established, then you can then, you know, ask them for support, ask them to show you how, you know, they got theirs. Because I think that relationship piece is super, super important.
I really appreciate all of your answers. I think it just really focuses on the importance and the power of forming relationships and being transparent with others and just getting to know people. I think that's really great for students to hear. Thank you very much. We're down to 2 questions. The next one is, how did you balance work, school / life while in school and transitioning to looking for a job? So that work-life balance and looking for the job. And Dr. Colburn, we'll start with you, ma'am.
All right, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I think overall I had a decent balance. Graduate school is hard. It's time consuming. You don't get that time back. To be clear, like I don't have children that I have to think about, or, I was in a relationship at the time. I'm not. And so I shouldn't say I'm not, sorry. I was in a relationship at the time, but so that was kind of the only thing I was, sort of had to like consider. My partner was in graduate school also. And so in that sense, I guess it was nice because we could, commiserate together. I don't know what my other panelists' relationship status looks like, but I will say, I think it would be really hard to be with somebody who was in graduate school if you are not, because the time commitment of graduate school is just like so far and away just tough to try and like balance other things, but that's probably way too personal and I apologize. But in general, I mean, I think trying to find other ways of decompressing. I'm a long distance runner. And so my thing is I needed to prioritize exercise because it was important for me to, make sure that I felt good within my body, but it was also great stress relief. I had great friends who were very understanding, both inside my program and out. And so wanting to make sure that I was prioritizing doing some other stuff that didn't have anything to do with school. But I'm also kind of a workhorse in the sense that, if I knew I had assignments or readings that needed to get done, then dang, I'm going to have to spend my whole Saturday doing this. And, I would try to make it so that I could have at least one day off over the weekend, but depending on what was going on at the time, that wasn't always possible. I will say, I mean, with graduate school, I feel like there is, or at least for me, there's a lot of sacrifice involved in terms of not being able to spend as much time with my extended family. That was really hard. My grandmother actually passed away at the very end of my program. And something I do regret is I sacrificed a lot of time that I could have spent with her because I needed to do an assignment or do some reading or do some research, fill in the blank. And so obviously I don't get that time back. And so that is, I guess, a bit of regret that I have, but it's also kind of one of those things, like when you have things that are due, what choice do you have? So I don't know if I'm the best example of a work-life balance, but I mean, I think trying to figure out what works for you, but also I am a big proponent of self-care. And so making sure that you are, nourishing your body, getting outside, exercise in whatever form feels good to you. I like to run, but maybe you don't. I think just movement in general is a great thing. And then, of course, connecting to people, relationships are important, and they don't always have to be academically focused. And so make sure that you're checking in with people and you're getting checked on too.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Cohen. Dr. Ekwerike.
Dr. Coburn, I want to say, like, nothing you said was too personal. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate your perspective always. I'm very critical of the term work-life balance. I mean, I should probably not say that as a psychologist, but I think something has to give. It's like juggling balls. Yeah, it's like if you have two balls, it's easy to balance, of course. But I don't think anyone here has two balls that they're trying to juggle. There's like 3, 4, 5, 6. The more balls you have, the harder it is to find that balance. And at one point or the other, one of those balls will drop. You just have to be able to live with it, that one of those balls will drop. What I do say to my friends is just make sure that the ball that drops is not the most important one. So it's about priorities, yeah. So for example, it sounds like Dr. Coburn feels like, she dropped the ball of spending more time with her grandma, and, she feels bad about that. But she had other balls she was juggling. At that point, she prioritized one over the other. And that's what we all need to, that's all we would have to do. That's all we can do is figuring out at this point in my life, what would I consider to be priority? And for me, I mean, I honestly did not have any great balance. Dr. Priest is on the call and she'll tell you how many times she told me to get a therapist. I probably should have gotten a therapist at the point because I was struggling with a lot of things at the same time. I was 6,000 miles away from home, writing my dissertation in the pandemic, locked in my apartment. It was hard, you know. I lost a close friend too, who was running my organization and had 2 daughters. I was completely devastated. But I just realized that at that point in time, my mental health had to suffer. You know, it just was what was going to happen at that point in time. And you know, I did what I could. Went exercise, you know, go running, you know, did everything I could to just not balance it, just to cushion the effect of the pain at the time. But honestly, when I think back to it, I mean, besides getting a therapist, there's nothing else I could have done differently. And I think I was fortunate too. So if you don't have access to the therapist, find yourself a coach. I don't know if Dr. Priest is currently taking clients, but Dr. Priest is an amazing coach. I had access to her for 3 years, you know, as my coach, holding space for me and just helping me make sense of, you know, the challenges I was going through and how to navigate them. But having somebody like that is absolutely crucial. Would not help you balance things out, but will help you like mitigate the impact of all of the stress you're going through. Right now, I think I have a better hang of things, and I've dropped some balls that I don't think are important, as important to me, and trying to keep my balls to 2 or 3 so I can juggle them without dropping any that I consider important. So that's what I would encourage you to do. For those of you who might feel like you do not know how to say no to things, it's important to learn how to say no to things. If not, you might be juggling a ball that's not as important and end up dropping one that's even more important to you. So just trying to simplify your life as much as possible is what I'd encourage you to do. You know, what are you currently juggling right now that you can let go of? I know that one of the things that I struggled with was just letting go of my organization back home. I had this heart-to-heart conversation with Dr. Priest, and she kept asking me these really hard questions. You know, why am I holding on to it, even though, you know, the time difference makes it really hard. I don't have as much resources to keep the organization floating. You know, do I feel comfortable with just allowing things to slip for now because I just can't have everything together? I don't think anyone does. Just having those honest conversations with yourself and making peace with letting things slip and being okay with it is the only advice that I can give.
Thank you very much. And Dylan.
I think just an incredible point about, you know, finding out what you want to prioritize. And I think I've gotten some great advice recently because I'm in a similar boat where, you know, there's so much to balance that you have to ask, like, how do I prioritize these things? And my mentor told me to prioritize the things where you can have the most impact, which I think, you know, there's other things layered into that, like what do I care about, what do I value, but the impact of those things as well becomes really important. But as far as work-life balance, I thought my opinion on this was going to diverge a little more from the two of you, but, you know, grad school and getting a doctorate is no easy task, so I should have anticipated that. But I think it really all depends on what you want out of it, right? At the end of the day, like, you can live a really balanced life and be perfectly happy, or you can live an unbalanced life and it'll bring pain points, but you can gain happiness out of that a lot. So when I think about it, I think so you can either have that healthy constant balance where you're efficient enough to accomplish what is required of you in a given amount of time, and then allows you to allocate some of your discretionary energy to those things that you do for pleasure. And we all know someone who's like insanely talented and can balance everything seemingly effortlessly. I'm not that person, and it's probably best to assume that you're not either, right? So I like to look at work-life balance in the long term. So if you want to be successful and enjoy the financial and societal benefits of that success, you're going to have to work your ass off, particularly while you're young. And you got to put in, like we were saying, the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. You got to put in the time. There's no easy way around it. and get really good at whatever it is you want to do. And then over time, you can build that life that does afford you more of the flexibility for balance in the long term. And that being said, I do think it's necessary, again, to constantly self-evaluate and never let anyone exploit you or take advantage of you and your willingness to work your ass off. But if you want that balance now, that's fine, but you might have to moderate your expectations on how far that'll get you later down the line.
I want to thank all three of you for the transparency and the vulnerability on that answer. I think it's great, and I echo what Dr. Ekwerike said to you, Dr. Colburn, that that transparency is really what's needed in these panels. Because there are students who are probably in that same situation that need to hear that type of advice. So thank you so much for that. And Dr. Ekwerike, could you please list in the chat the book that you mentioned? I would like to referred back to that book as well, and Dylan, I've seen that you've referenced it as well. In transition to the last question, I know that we talked about this prior to Dr. Scheer leaving us, but just for the students who may have missed out, outside of salary, what were other benefits that you negotiated? Are there any other benefits that you wish you had negotiated, such as medical or continuing education or retirement? And Dylan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so this just all goes back to a lot of what we've talked about already, and understanding your own value and scenarios of what's important for you. So for some people that might be salary, and other people that might be, other, whether it's continuing education or some of the other things listed here. So just don't be afraid to ask for what you want, and do your research. Have an idea of what your value or the value of what you're bringing to the table is relative to the market and your peers. And remember, again, that each one of you will be bringing value to these organizations. It's not a one-way street. So I also can't understate the importance of continued learning throughout your career. That's something that I put as kind of a primary focus in the places that I'm going, because you'll be surprised how unusual true competence can be, and sometimes I feel like I'm not even there. So so keeping yourself educated and engaged is a great way to stay on the ball and really set yourself apart.
That's great. Thank you. And Dr. Ekwerike.
So for me, taking my job was, what I was prioritizing when I was thinking about taking this job was having time for family, even though I don't have any personal family. But I knew down the line that I wanted a job that would give me time for family. And so being clear about, how many classes would I teach? Teaching professors tend to teach like a 4-4 load. That's 4 classes every semester. And just being clear with them, like, hey, I don't want to teach a 4-4 load. How else do I make up for that? Just having that. Thankfully, I did not have to push with my current job. It was clear I was going to teach only 3 classes per semester, and so that was good. It was one of the things that made me take the job. Like I said, the terms are just so good that I did not have to push for anything. But when I was negotiating the other job, which I eventually turned down, negotiated salary, negotiated increase, an increase in my startup salary, research fund, because I was going to be doing research, and they were willing to give those things too. So, just ask, honestly, just ask for the things, and the worst they can say is no. I remember when I asked for an increase in the salary that they offered, the dean who I spoke to was, just really gracious and open with the information. Like, this is the cap that they have, and it's not because they don't want to offer me more. This is just what they can offer, and they're more than happy to give me the max amount within that cap. And so just asking what that cap might be, and I know you said other than salary, but salary is super, super important, especially in higher ed, where you don't get paid much anyway. So you might as well just earn as much as you can that they're willing to offer. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. For higher ed, things like retirement it's pretty set in stone. You can alter that as you go. You can decide your own fate, how much you will contribute to that as you go, but there's not much to negotiate in terms of retirements. And And with healthcare, it depends on what's what the school is and how much funds they have available. That determines the quality of healthcare. So I don't think there's much you can negotiate with healthcare too in higher ed. But so salary, and research startup funds is super important. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Colburn, we'll end with you, ma'am.
Awesome. So I didn't really need to negotiate much. My job came with a full benefits package of medical, dental, vision, retirement, time off. I wish that they just like threw in a gym membership at the rec, but the rates are pretty cheap, so I can't complain too much. I feel like such a dweeb every time I say this, but I mean, graduate students do not get paid well. So getting your first job outside of graduate school, man, I felt rich. And I'm not even paid that much, I'll be honest with you. But man, it's like nice to actually get a salary. So keep trucking. And I mean, I graduated from K-State and my job is at K-State, so there was no need for relocation expenses or anything like that. But the benefits package is super nice. And, I don't know, just again, the transition from graduate student insurance and like graduate student pay to actually being able to go to the doctor and have like a health savings account, I feel very behind in the sense that like a lot of my peers, I feel like have had these things for like years and I'm like, whole new world, what is it like to be able to have a savings account? I don't know, this is new and fun. But I think another just like big thing with this is I kind of mentioned earlier that I kind of took on a secondary role of adjuncting for the department that I graduated out of here at K-State. And presenting that to, my boss here and saying, hey, I know I have a full-time job here, but my department wants to pay me to teach a class. Can I do that? They were understandably a little bit apprehensive because, I have full responsibilities here and, the work I do here is very important to me. And obviously they didn't want me to be, schlepping my work to then go teach students. But I think the lesson in that though is know your own capabilities and advocate for yourself, because I know what my work ethic is. And there's a Will Smith quote, which I know Will Smith is a little bit marred in controversy right now, but if I may, I have it taped up on my desk and I'm going to read it to you. It says, I am not afraid to die on a treadmill. I will not be outworked. You might be more talented than me, you might be smarter than me, and you might be better looking than me. But if you and I get on a treadmill at the same time, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to get off first or I'm going to die. I will not be outworked. And I don't know about you, but that gets me pretty fired up because I feel like that is emblematic of like who I am as a person. And so I guess it's one of those things of like, sure, I can understand why they were a little bit apprehensive. And to be fair, I'm teaching one class, I'm not teaching multiple classes, but I do have a full-time job, so it is extra. And so it was just a thing where I was like, you know what? No, I can handle this. Y'all have no idea the type of, how much I was stretched as a graduate student in terms of all my responsibilities and everything, all the different balls I was juggling. And so me adding on a class to my already full-time job is something I can do. And if you want to pay me for it, I'm not going to turn down an additional income source. And so it worked out fine and it's all well and good. And, I guess all that to say again is know your own capabilities and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. And that of course definitely goes within negotiating the terms of your employment. And so this is again kind of like a non-traditional addition, but I'm glad that I advocated for that because I think that the two roles that I kind of play here at K-State work really well with each other. And I'm glad that I get to keep teaching because that was something I really loved as a graduate student as well. And so it's just been fun to keep that up.
Thank you so much for that. Really, really good information from all of you. I don't see any questions in the chat, so those were the last of the questions that we had assigned, but Again, no questions in the chat, so I will open up the floor for anyone in the audience who would like to ask any of our panelists any questions.
I had a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I don't know if someone said something either, but so I'm still undergrad going up to grad school next year, but I wanted to maybe ask advice from you guys how to build more meaningful bonds with the professors, with the faculty, rather than just the normal passerby, see you next week type of thing. Because it's definitely like the vibe in undergrad, but I feel like it's more meaningful to have deeper relations with your professors in grad programs.
I can
Yeah,
start.
if you guys don't mind. Yeah, you go first. I was going to say I'll give a really short answer because I haven't been in school for a long time, but you can go.
Yeah, no, you go ahead and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, I think what Dr. Ekwerike was saying about, just going that extra level to understand what they care about and learn about them on a more personal level and just ask really good questions. That's what I would advocate.
Yeah, and I would follow up with that. I had 3 really meaningful mentors that I worked with throughout my graduate program. And again, a lot of it just comes down to going up to them and saying, hey, do you have any research that I might be able to work on? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an assistantship, but my first opportunity did come with a publication. And so, I'm not saying that's how it always is, but I think it's just, probably over time and like within your major, you're going to kind of pick up certain professors that you just really enjoy learning from. And so I would say hone in on that person or persons and go up to them. And again, it's kind of this like flattery thing that can kind of get you far. If you go up to them and you're like, hey, I'm really interested in what you do. I really respect you as a professor, and I would love to work with you on a project if you have one. And again, it may be a more formal thing, it may not be, but even if it's an informal opportunity, it could turn into a formal opportunity. So just having the confidence to go up to somebody and say, hey, can I work with you at some point? I think that would probably be a really great place to start.
Thank you so much.
Great question, Kaylee. Thank you.
I'll also add real quickly that, Kali, that the power dynamics changes a bit when you're in grad school too. So, I mean, while it might be a bit awkward to send a professor an email and say, do you have any availability this week to have coffee? As an undergrad, in grad school, you can do that. You can send the professor an email and say, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. Check and see if you have an availability to have coffee. Just like to talk about, my current graduate work and how I feel like you might be able to support me. Professors are more likely to, more open to things like that at the grad level, I like to think. But as a professor here, many of my undergraduate students actually just, send me emails and ask for office hours or just chat. They just want to chat, because I always ask the students to say, please indicate something about this meeting that can help me prepare, for the meeting. And students literally just say, I just want to come in and chat with you, and that's okay. So, just send emails to whoever you want to build a relationship with, just like in any other kind of, relationship. You make that effort and you show genuine personal interest, and you're generous with information about yourself too. What are you currently working on? What are you hoping to get out of grad school? If you don't know what you're hoping to get out of grad school, that's okay too. How might it help you clarify what your goals might be in grad school? How might you support their research? How might they support your research? Things like that. So be proactive. Even if you just want to go and talk about your dogs. I had students come in and just talked about their dog and their cats, and that was it, and that was good. It was a great start. So do not be afraid to initiate those conversations once you get into grad school.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Is there any other questions in the audience?
Come on, guys. Good questions are how you get places. That's what I'm typing in the chat right now too.
I agree. We did uncover a lot of good information, but if you also would like to pose a question in the chat, please feel free.
All right, we got a question in the chat, I think.
What are some things you wish you would have done or learned during graduate school? It was the question.
So I feel like mine's a lot less academic in a way, my graduate school experience, because it was very practical, the type of education that we're doing. We're very hands-on in the way that we were approaching design challenges. So for me, I wish I would have been a little more engaged with the rest of the campus and the community. I felt in the architecture school, it tends to be kind of insular in some ways. And though we do have opportunities occasionally, like we did a project where we worked with veterans at Fort Riley, which was an incredible experience just to learn from individuals firsthand that we were designing for, or we went to the Learning Development Center on campus to design a children's toy. So there were some really cool prompts in that way. And I wish I would have taken a little more advantage of growing the network outside of the College of Architecture. So definitely, I think we can only benefit from cross-pollination of ideas and disciplines.
For me, I mean, I wish that two things. I wish that I was more engaged with the Manhattan community, you know, outside of K-State. I did that at the end of my program, you know, worked with Habitat for Humanity to like facilitate like front porch conversations, you know, things like that, just getting to learn more about people in the community and the issues they're facing and volunteering a bit more. So that's one thing I think I wish that I did. I wish that I, you know, also in grad school took like a finance class or something, you know, became more financially intelligent. Because, you know, like Dr. Coburn said, when you finish grad school, you get paid whatever pennies you get paid, you get excited, you know, about the monies. But then you really don't know what to do with the monies, you know, when they come in. And so many of the things I'm learning now, 7 months into my job, I wish that I'd known just going into the job, I would have saved more, invested more, you know, done some more cool things. That I just did not have a clue, and I feel really sad that nobody, you know, talked to me about it while I was in college, because I think that, especially in America, where, you know, the whole system is built to keep you in debt, I think that it's important to know how to manage monies and how to invest and things like that. So if you get a chance, even though you feel like you're broke now, and you're probably broke because you're in college, in grad school, you know, still apply yourself, still seek to learn, you know, how to manage finances, how to invest, you know, how do you buy a home, even though you're broke and you don't have the money now, what's the process like, and things like that. I think would be great. It would be great when you eventually get a job and you start getting all those monies in.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo exactly that. I feel very behind in terms of knowing about investments and stocks and how to grow your money outside of just, you know, the salary that you bring in. And so, yeah, I really wish that was something that I was better versed in. I feel as though I'm coming into a lot of independence late, if that makes sense. And so in a lot of ways, I've had to learn things that I feel like my peers have learned a while ago that I'm learning now. And so I don't really know if that's anything that can really be categorized into like a class or anything like that. But I think it's just kind of some of the growing pains and like stunted growth that come as a result of graduate school. Outside of just learning more about finances, though, I can't really think of anything I wish I would have done differently. You know, I wish I could have traveled more, but, you know, what do you do? So anyway, I think that's probably about all I have. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have one last question that asks, I'm an undergraduate student, but I am planning to go into a different graduate program than my current major. Is there any advice there? And I think that Dr. Ekwuike, you can speak on that as you kind of transition as well, but I'm sure all three of you can probably give some good advice.
I'll start. So mine was, like I said, kind of all intertwined. So I don't have a lot of direct experience here, but I don't think you should be afraid of jumping to a different program or a different graduate program. Again, there's value in the diversity of thought and ideas, and I think it's healthy to agree or disagree, but obviously come to the table with an informed opinion and learn from people, be willing to learn and change your mind about things. So bring whatever value you get in your undergrad degree, you can bring to that graduate program, and you might have a completely different perspective, which actually lends a lot of value to yourself and your peers.
So, I mean, I also, transitioned from psychology to leadership. I remember the first couple classes I went to, I felt like, what was I doing here? Because academically, I did not feel like I was prepared for what I was learning. But what I would say is you'd feel like a fraud from time to time. You'd feel like, those people who, had their undergrad in the same discipline as their grad studies are a bit ahead of you, but do not be discouraged. The thing about learning is you can learn whatever you want to learn. So just apply yourself. The mindset that I had was, what's one more thing I'd learned this week that I did not know before? And often it was, there's always something that I was going to learn, because I did not have a ton of academic background in leadership. So I just say go in curious, just be very curious. And as you're learning these things, think about, how do I apply the knowledge that I'm learning? Because I do think that one of the things that would keep you really interested and excited about the things you're learning is when you can find ways to really apply the things that you're learning. So go into those classes, go into those readings, asking yourself, what's one thing I can learn today? And even if you don't understand all of the readings and you don't, feel like all of the classes make sense to you, just find that one thing that's going to keep you going. And once you find that one thing, think about how you might apply it in your current life and in your future work. And that's just really going to help you keep going. And gradually you build the muscles, to do the heavy lifting. I think your first year is probably going to be challenging. I don't know if it's a master's program or PhD program, but the more you continue in the program, the more those muscles develop. So just don't get discouraged. Just keep pushing when you get in there. I just want to be clear that it's going to be challenging, because a lot of things are going to sound like Greek to you because you don't have the background. I found it really interesting that many disciplines have their own languages. Yeah, I probably would take a class in architecture and would not understand a thing the professor is saying. Because I don't have access to the discourse around the field. So you might find that you don't have access to the discourse and may not understand the language, but the more you apply yourself, the more you pour yourself into the readings and those classes, the better your muscles will develop.
Any final thoughts, Dr. Colburn?
I don't think I could say anything better than what my two co-panelists have said, so I'm just gonna reemphasize what they said.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we're about 5 minutes out, so I will go on ahead and stop the questions there. I want to thank our panelists for being here first and for sharing the wealth of knowledge that they've given, with the transparency and sharing your experiences. I think the students will really benefit from that. I thank you for that. Thank you to the students and our guests who have spent their Friday afternoon with us. I think this was beneficial for all parties involved. So thank you very much. Again, go K-State, and have a great weekend. And thank you all for being here again.